Want to know how to improve relationships at work? One little 180-degree shift. In this video, we're going to unpack, this is a little bit harder than actually just flipping a letter, to go from this me-centered relationship to a more other-centric, healthier way of relating, or more productive way of relating. But we're going to unpack the neuroscience of what's involved in this shift. Let's get into it. In this video, I'm going to unpack 3 key dynamics that I've observed in working with some of the coolest universities and organizations on the planet in terms of how they make this shift, when they get stuck here, and how they're able to make this shift. And so I'm going to give you those 3 dynamics along with like 3 really super hyper immediate practical things that you can do to actually improve relationships at work. I'm Chad Littlefield. I do this stuff and record these videos because I believe that we should have more conversations that matter on the planet and less that don't. So this is cool, right? If you haven't seen or discovered the fact that this happens, like that's just kind of a cool meme or reminder. It's the reason that the organization I started is called We and Me. It's the reason our website is weand.me, is because all of the workplace and organizational dynamics that I've ever observed working with clients can ping and pong between these 2 dynamics. And I can walk in and anyone can describe any situation and I can say, is this a me dynamic or a we dynamic? And the reason that is, and the reason we chose these particular words is this refers to, is our colloquial language for what I would say is our lizard brain. It's like our amygdala, the fight or flight response, or anymore because there's no saber-toothed tigers, it's the fight, flight, or need to be right response. That's more how it shows up at work or in relationships. And so when we're in that place, it's a default way of thinking. It's not actually bad. It actually just is a way that our brains work, right? All of the things that happen by default and automatic are really important. Like the fact that our heart is still beating is a good thing without thinking about it, right? The fact that you didn't think about your breathing until I mentioned your breathing is a good thing, that things happen by default. And yet we have, as human beings, this giant part of our front of our brain called the prefrontal cortex, which allows us to shift into a higher level of more deliberate thinking rather than default. And in that place, we can be confused, we can critically think, we can be curious, we can wonder, we can do a lot of things with this lovely 8-pound block that sits on the top of our head. The only thing is we have to choose to switch. Otherwise, we remain in that default place. So the first dynamic that I'm going to unpack is this idea of, actually, Stephen, this idea of learning versus knowing, right? I would argue that the bridge between those is curiosity. And the really concrete way that you can improve relationships is to increase the level of curiosity. And so on the back of this card is literally a very tiny micro action to ask someone what their favorite app is, right? How many of us have like 50 plus, 100 plus apps downloaded on our phone, but they're these very like individual devices. We might not exchange, like, right? Steven, you might have, what is your favorite app actually?
Probably Frame.io. It's like you know what? See, it's a video production app, so yeah.
It is. Frame.io is lovely if you do video edits. It allows me to, okay, anyway, rabbit hole. This is actually what happens with curiosity though, is it opens up all of these other doors inside somebody's 8-pound block, usually in the prefrontal cortex, not their amygdala. And when that happens, when culturally, either individual relationships or culturally as an organization, you move from a culture of knowing to a culture of learning, right? Productivity goes up, people's desire to be with coworkers, people's desire to be in connection with each other goes up. It's just kind of a good, healthy perspective. Carol Dweck would call this fixed mindset versus growth mindset. I think that language works perfectly as well. I like the idea of learning mindset because it's a verb, right? I can learn about somebody else, and in turn, I'm putting myself into a growth mindset and I'm growing my knowledge of someone, my knowledge about an idea, etc. Before we go on to the second one, I keep waving these things around and I've almost hit myself in the head 3 times. So let's let go of we and me for a moment and zoom into second dynamic. which is this concept of making assumptions versus exploring possibilities, or maybe better than versus is and. Because again, it's not one is better than the other. It's really useful when you go into a restaurant, it's really useful for you to make assumptions about how to do that. So you're not like, oh my gosh, how do I order? Like you don't want to explore possibilities of how to, like you just want to go in and eat and have a peaceful meal. And so making assumptions and exploring possibilities, both fine. If you're watching this video and you're wanting to improve workplace relationships, shifting from a place of making assumptions to a place of exploring possibilities helps get you there faster. The easiest tool to be able to do that is to ask questions. And the reason that this tool is it's like kind of stupidly simple, but it's so powerful is that when Will and I were doing research for our book, Ask Powerful Questions, Create Conversations That Matter, we found that on average, kids between the ages of 3 and 5 asked 300 to 400 questions per day, and adults asked 6 to 12 questions per day. Wow. And so literally just by saying a few more sentences that end in question marks rather than periods will mechanically shift your relationship and your organization from a place of making assumptions to exploring possibilities. You know, in a relationship, if you literally just double your count of questions, that's really impactful. That other person's gonna feel like you're interested in them rather than just trying to be interesting. If you want a really concrete action for that, ask somebody you just recently met what brings them joy. One of the coolest questions. What brings them joy? If you've worked with a colleague for more than a year and you can't answer this question, or you can't answer this question with extreme detail, what's up with that? What brings them joy? So useful to be able to know what brings us joy because we can weave that into work, right? If I know that you love video editing, but your job is actually 90% spreadsheets, maybe I give you a project once a week that relates to video editing and we grow that joy, that strength, that etc. And so really great team meeting to meet around this question of what brings you joy. And you might edit this to say what brings you professional joy, because you don't want to just have a conversation and be like family time, watching TV, right? Like things that are totally outside of work. So what brings you joy professionally? And then answer the question, and how can we do more of that? Really cool way to shift from a place of just making assumptions about how work should be or how we should be with each other to a place of exploring possibilities of what is possible at work. Like you realize when we wake up and we show up at work on Monday, like there's an infinite amount of choices that we could make, but we typically make like the same 7 that we always make every Monday. And so just the power of this to just break you out and like, what's the 8th choice? What's the other thing that we might be able to dive into and explore? Third dynamic, I shared a ton in other videos, is this concept of listening to win versus and listening to understand. I'm not gonna unpack the concept in depth. You can probably gauge some of what that means right off the bat, just hearing that context. It relates to this fight, flight, or need to be right though. When we listen to win, somebody tells us a story and we're like, ooh, let me tell the story that, not even necessarily one-ups that, but just let me tell the story about me that relates to that. Whereas listening to understand says, just for a minute, what if I forget about all of my lifetime of ungoogleable experience and just really hold and pay attention to what you're sharing in that moment? If you're still watching this video to unpack how to improve work relationships, that shift is probably one of the most powerful things, and all it takes is a choice. It's like in any moment, like you can be listening to win, of like, oh, I want to tell a story, I want to tell, no. And then you can be in that place of listening to understand. If you want to take it up one notch even further, listen to what that person shares and then respond, describing the world as they see it. This is the most practical, tangible tool that Will and I teach people to build empathy with another person. Empathy is a really hard skill to teach, but describing the world as that person sees it, both in your head and sometimes in conversation, right? Just reflecting back and describing, like, so if somebody is, you ask them how their weekend was and they tell you something that they did, they went to a wedding of a friend and it was blah, blah, blah. You could say like, oh, cool, and tell a story about a wedding of a friend that you went to. Or you could say, wow, it sounds really important to you. It sounds like that time was really fulfilling and kind of filled up your cup or your bucket. So different, right? Those two different ways of listening are so different. One makes someone feel super appreciated for who they are, And the other one just goes back to focusing on me. Thanks for making the shift. I'm Chad Littlefield. If you liked this, you'll love these 2 videos suggested here. I put out a lot of video content to help people, leaders and educators, make connection and engagement easy. So feel free to subscribe and check out the rest of the channel. Have an awesome day.